Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. I recently attended a meeting of the broadcast pioneers of Philadelphia. Revered in the communications industry, the pioneers have been around for a long time. And among the members are some of the better known radio and television celebrities in the greater Philadelphia market. It was my first meeting, so I didn't know what to expect. I picked up my name tag, walked towards the room where the lunch was to be served, and again, wasn't quite sure what to expect, but in the center of the room, taking a break from working the room, was a priest. His name was Father James N. Drucker, variously known as the Doo-Wop priest or the rock and roll priest. His story was amazing, and I'm not quite sure I believed it at the time, because he told me that before becoming a priest, he was a songwriter, music promoter, talent agent, producer, publisher, electrician, radio electrician, and popular radio jockey with a big audience. The way I know all that is that once he gets your attention, Father Jim will regale you with a series of highly improbable stories. Yes, he was he was the road manager, rather, for Patti LaBelle. He knew personally Bobby Rydell and Frankie Avalon and all of the other heartthrob crooners of that era. And of course, he knew all of the rock and roll bands. Frankly, even though he's a priest, I wondered how much of his dossier was fancy. I can tell you that it's all true, and there are scores of people who will provide testimony to the veracity of his life story, his storybook life, including that part of his life where at age 36, he entered the seminary to become a priest in the Catholic Greek Church. That's a mouthful so far, Father.
I just wanted to make sure that I regale properly. I want to regale the proper way on your show.
You were regaling for minutes and you haven't stopped. So anyway, welcome to 30 Minutes.
It's a blessing to be here. My God, everything.
You shook the room.
Shaking.
You shook the room. It took some time for me to do the introduction because
it's great to be here on the Father Jim Drucker show. As my guest today, Richard Anthony. You're from what area are you, Richard?
I took the time to do the intro because I knew you were going to do just that. You were going to take over the program, so I could leave and just come back at the end for the close.
I work with a wonderful man, a friend of mine to this day. We've known each other 60 years when we worked at Warm, the #1 radio station in America.
WARM.
On the mighty 590, WARM, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton's #1 station for fun.
Oh, you did it with the twang, too, the upstate twang.
It's a Pennsylvania twang. We call it a regionalism in broadcasting, Rich. Not a twang, but a regionalism. Unless you have a regionalism in the South, and it's a Southern twang regionalism. Right. But I work with this fellow, Stephen Alice Scott. I'm driving to work one day to do my all-night gig, and Steve's on the air and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Warm, the mighty 590. He said, "But I'll tell you what, for you, I'll get it for 589. I almost went off the road. So we're dear friends. He lives in Scranton. I'm up in the Hazleton area, but I'm from Philly. So what a great life it was in Philadelphia. But continue on, Richard. Yes, you may.
Good. Okay. Seriously, though.
Okay.
No, I do want to mention that you earned that hat, and you were an Air Force chaplain.
Yes, sir.
You were in Iraq, 2 tours.
I was in the zone of combat operation in southern Turkey into the northern Iraq with the 39th Combat Support Squadron, the senior Catholic chaplain. There were 3 of us priests. I was on at the base Incirlik, which was the flying fighting base. It was absolutely incredible. We did all the bombing raids on northern Iraq. And it was just wonderful to be there and to be a captain in the Air Force and to serve these young men and women. I'd like to go back now.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
I've got to come up with a question to which you have a short answer.
Okay. Go ahead, try me.
I knew this was going to be fun, and I have no idea where it's going to go. Normally,
I think with that, I'll take my hat off now that we're established. So you see, as Richard said when I came on the set, he said, "Boy, you don't have hair like me, do you, Father?" I shouldn't have break. That's a breaking confidences here.
All right, let's begin from the beginning.
Sure.
Why were you so interested in music? I assume from a young man. And why and where did you make the commitment to build a career in music?
I grew up in Philadelphia. I call it K&A. Technically, it's Port Richmond, Fishtown, Lehigh Avenue, and the two streets, Cumberland, Survivor. St. Anne's Church was down the block. That was my home parish. And when I was young and got into elementary school, the good sisters of St. Joseph's, besides knuckles and, and rulers.
I had them too. They're really good.
Very accomplished ruler people. They ruled the nest well anyway. They gave me a trombone when I was like, I think, third or fourth or fifth grade. And then it progressed to finally till I got to high school. I was at St. Anne's School. And then sadly, some things had happened and I went to public school. My mother took me to Hackett. And went from Hackett to John Paul Jones Junior High School. We pledge our loyalty, justice, order, and neatness, whatever. And then went from there to Edison. Yeah. And sadly, I don't know if your audience knows this, a book written by Richard Sand, a good friend of mine, a lawyer, a wonderful man, wrote a book about 64 men who left high school, Edison High School, 8th and Lehigh, where I attended, and went to war in Vietnam and gave their lives. It was the largest death toll of any young men of any high school in America is Edison High School. And Judge Catholic High School was the second largest. So anyway, I grew up loving music, playing the trombone. Eventually I went to guitar, but that was years later. But my formative years of school, elementary, into junior high, Jones Junior, and Edison was the trombone. But then when I got to Edison, I met the Ecuadors, the famous Ecuadors, Sputnik Dance on RCA Records. The record bombed, sadly. And Mr. Ray, who was African American, he was our choir teacher because I love singing. He used to teach Johnny Ray singing lessons.
Oh, really?
Yes. Mr. Ray, at 8th and Lehigh, Edison High School. And Mr. Anello was our band orchestra leader. That's when I played trombone.
Was Johnny Ray from Philadelphia?
I don't think so, but I do know he would come in, and my understanding was, then I was 17 years old, was that Mr. Ray was of help to Johnny Mathis. Johnny Mathis. If I said Johnny Ray, I'm wrong. Forgive me, blooper, anyway. And he helped to form his beginning years into his stardom. But while I was there, I met a group called the Boss Tones. Not much after that, they would have a record come out on Boss Record, my V-Tone or Boss Records. And it became close friends with Babbo. Is an African-American black fellow with red hair. He sang like an angel. And Robbie Robinson and Willie Weaver, who I'm going to see later tonight, he sang baritone. And I took two of them and two of the Lydells. We're off to see the Wizard. Yeah. Wonderful. One time I was lonely, next time I was the Wizard of Love. I took two white fellas, two black fellas. They wanted the Chancellor Records and the heat and the dark of night, Russell Faith, who wrote When a Girl Changes from Bobby Socks to Stockings, Why, Somewhere in Your Heart for Frank Sinatra, did all the Avalon, Fabian, etc. Chancellor record, and we cut Stormy Weather. And I wrote the flip side called Working at the Factory on Atlantic Records. Atlantic Records, the #1 R&B label record company in the world at that time, owned by Ahmet Erdogan, who is a Turkish fella. And the history takes me to Turkey eventually during the combat of Iraq and Desert Storm. Well, we cut this record, released it, and unfortunately it bombed, as we say in the business. But it became a cult record, because if you hear it, it's phenomenal. He sings like an angel, Duval Young. It was all a cappella with a rhythm section, a group called Sal Massey and the Untouchables from South Philadelphia was one of the lounge groups at Jolly Joyce Theatrical Booking Agency, or as a talent scout. And they were kind enough to do the background. Chancellor Records, Atlantic Records, on my way to music.
Patti LaBelle.
When I was young, my early 20s, late teens, and I worked for Norman Joyce, wonderful man, love him dearly, a blessed memory. I used to hang with Jamie Guyton, recording artists and producers, and Chancellor and Cameo. And somehow I got involved with, I think it was Bobby Martin, and he recorded Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells in the underground of 6600 North Broad Street, Harold B. Robinson dealership. He had a studio downstairs. He loved music, and he had the record company Newtown Records. Yeah. So I used to take them upstate to this, what we call the secondary markets, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Allentown. Yeah. Gene Kay, who lives in Drescher right now. He's like 91 years old, and his daughter is a sports gal, Colby, on the EWTN, the ESPN. And I remember taking them up to Gene Kay, to Sid Friedman, up at WNEP in Scranton. You may know that. Your roots are up that area. And I took them all around to WYNS, WSCR, WBAX, WARM, the #1 station in America. What exciting life. And there were wonderful girls. And Cindy used to be with them at that time. And then eventually she went on to join the Supremes.
Well, no.
Am I regaling enough, I hope?
Yeah, you're regaling.
I want to make sure I regale properly.
That brings you up to about age 28.
I don't, take me where you're going at age 28.
Well, eventually I want to get to the seminary.
Okay.
And I want to find out what accounted for the transition. Were you struck by lightning like St. Paul? Did God say, hey, it's time? When did you begin to realize that you had a calling?
All I remember is in the music era, in the early 60s, in 64, I joined the Army National Guard as an enlisted infantryman. I think it was the 111th at Broad and Wharton Streets. I went to Fort Jackson, spent 6 months of intensified infantry training, 2 months basic, 2 months advanced infantry, not advanced individual training, like I'd become a doctor, lawyer, or an explosive expert, sort of, and then 2 months of basic unit training where we were taught bombs and everything else. And we came this close, I did, and my group, of being sent to Vietnam, even as guardsmen. It didn't happen, thank God. So I spent 6 years in the Army, Guard, and the Reserve. Now bring me back. I'm 81.
Somehow you decided, or someone decided for you, maybe your good mother, that you had the material to be a half-decent priest.
I started meeting a lot of priests. One in a wonderful memory was Father Nicholas Fasanik, a Ukrainian Catholic priest stationed in Nanticoke. And every year, because I was a famous DJ up in Scranton, we didn't get into that yet at WIRM. I knew everybody there, WBRE TV, WNEP, WDAU. I would do spots, as we call them, spots, public service. Father Nicholas Fasadik and the parishioners of Holy Transfiguration Church invite you to attend their, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I got him TV spots, commercial, PSA, so forth. I met him, he was blind. And every time I go to his Mass, Ukrainian Catholic, under the Pope, not Orthodox, so God bless the Orthodox, but under the Pope, but I'm Eastern, Ruthenian Byzantine Catholic. And I saw him, I met Father Paul Garrity, who was a Passionist priest when I was working at WARM Radio. Wonderful man. I used to stay at St. Paul's Basilica, it's now a Basilica, the Passionist Monastery in Scranton. I knew a Bishop John Stock, a blessed memory, when I went to work as Jack Mitchell, WAVZ, and Jack Mitchell, JM in the AM, et cetera, in New Haven, Connecticut. I worked with Joe Lane, who went on to become Joe McCoy. He ended up becoming the head boss of WCBS-FM, which was even almost in greater ratings than WABC, and he became Joe McCoy. I worked with Joe Lane, or should I say, I'm regaling now, he worked with me.
Yes. Did you know Dick Clark?
I met him one time. I was on bandstand one time, a cute story. Pat Boone was the guest. My God, Richard, was he handsome. He was incredibly handsome. But what happened that day, I was going into the studios, it turned out that the young street kids of Philadelphia, I'm a street kid from Philly, from Kensington, they stole everything out of his manager's car, records, umbrella, shirt, and tapes and everything. I said, welcome to Philadelphia. I shouldn't say that, but it's a true story. That I remember that from FAO. So I did not know Dick very well, but I got to know Jerry Blavat very well. I've known Jerry since 1961 because when I was with Buzzy Curtis of Post Records, he, Jerry Blavat, and Russell Faith, the head of A&R, Artist and Repertoire of Chancellor Records, all gathered together for this production, this record that I produced called Stormy Weather. So I became very close friends. And of course, Jerry just recently passed away, the blessed memory, and Bobby Rydell and Charlie Gracie, a very, very dear friend. He and Joan and his son, Charlie Jr.
Who were the other crooners you knew, like Rydell, and although they did their fair share of rock as well?
Well, back in the day when I worked for Jolly Joyce Agency, 10th and Chestnut, the Victory Building, we booked Johnny Maestro and the Crest. We exclusively booked Bill Haley and the Comets. We had an exclusive contract. We booked the Three Stooges. Most of that was done out of New York. Bill Haley, of course, was Philadelphia. The New York was Van Joyce, the brother, and it was Norman and Van, the sons of Jolly Joyce. And they worked out of New York at 58 West 48th. How's that for 81? 58 West 48th Street in New York City. So we had all kind of groups. And in the meantime, I booked Avalon. I booked Bobby Rydell, who 40 years later I would meet, and then meet his wife, Linda, who was actually a fan of mine. I couldn't believe it when I met her at Ralph's up in the upper room, the oldest Italian restaurant family owned in America. And he said, Linda, I'd like you to meet Father Drucker, Father Jim Drucker, Philadelphia's Doo-Wop priest. Yeah, Drucker. Are you from Scranton? Yeah. Said, do you work for Warren? I said, yes. She said, oh my God. She listened to me. She was one of my groupies. So I booked them all. And now I'm working on projects. Herb Oscar Anderson, the former morning mayor of WABC, #1 station in America, 50,000 watts of power, whole East Coast. He was the morning mayor. Hello again. He sang to you. He was marvelous. His daughter is now doing a documentary on him, which may be a movie, so I'm helping her to get a lot of acts. I already contracted and asked Tony Orlando, who's a good friend of mine, Ron Dante, Sugar, and the Cufflings, Tracy. He was the voice. And we have let me see, the Duprees. We have Tony Botello, one of my dearest friends, who is the Letterman. Just a whole bunch of groups. Joey D, I talked to yesterday. He's going to do a feed, a half-hour show. So we got that rolling so we can give love to Herb Oscar Anderson's memory and to his family, Carla and his wife, Terry. Good. I'm regaling well, I hope. Anyway.
Let me try to get back on the main road.
Yes, sir.
The seminary.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. So anyway, with Father and all these priests, I started saying, so I'm at Warm Radio, and I decide, do I want the priesthood? Do I not? I'm already 27 years old. I was dating a gal named Judy. She married the other fella, whatever. A good college boy from Villanova, right down the block. And so anyway, I'm going blank. Bring it back again.
On the way to the seminary.
Okay.
When did you decide, or what was it that cinched it for you that you were heading and making a career change?
Yeah. So what happened when I left Warm? I went to work for WBAX. Merv Griffin had just bought the radio station, one of his 21 stations. And in the day, 60s and 70s, there was the 21 rule. You could only own 7 AM, 7 FM, and 7 TV. So while I was there, Jim Ward that owned the station, it didn't work out. He brought me on as program director. It was easy listening. I was a rock jock from WSCR, WARM. So I started thinking, what is God calling me to? So I got in my car and drove. And there was a religious order called Society of St. Paul. Not the Paul list, but the Paulines. And their specialty was like the Daughters of St. Paul. They had books, they had they had press, they had TV, they had a radio. They owned a big radio station in Rio de Janeiro, 50,000 watt. They wanted to send me there. So I went and investigated, spent a week in West Seneca, Buffalo, New York, where their seminary was. I spent a week with Brother Ed Donaher, who was vocation director at Victory Boulevard in Staten Island. That was their seminary, and their book binding, where they put the books together. And also I spent a week in Canton, Ohio. And it was while I was there, I started to realize I was being called to holy priesthood. So then I realized I was all my life Roman Catholic, to my knowledge. Well, here I realized that my father had died when I was 2 months old, a blessed memory, Samuel Paul, and my mother was Greek Catholic. So because of that, I started studies for the Greek Catholic rite of the Catholic Church. And I went to Pittsburgh for 4 years, from 1974 to 1978, after I realized I had this calling. And by the way, before that, I went on retreat up in Tobyhanna. There was a Father Bill Jameson. What a wonderful man he was. I went to confession to him. Now, needless to say, I can't share confession. I can share what I shared, that's personal. And I remember he said, come and see me. I want to talk to you in the parlor. So I went, he said, and they told him my scenario. I said, you know what? I think you should be a priest. He said, normally I tell someone to come back in a year to discern. Yeah. But he said, you're 27, you've been successful, you've had records, you've been a successful radio announcer, disc jockey, you're a roller, a mover, a groover. He said, I suggest. So I got to see Bishop Michael Dudek, and I went back to college, to the University of Scranton at age 30, and I finished my degree because I had a certificate degree from Emerson College in Boston with the Fonz, Henry Winkler, believe it or not, and Vinnie DeBona, who did MacIver, a wonderful 60 years ago. My God help her. So I ended up accepting the calling, accepting what Father Jameson shared with me, and I started studies at St. Cyril Methodius Byzantine Catholic Seminary in Pittsburgh for 4 years. It was tough. I was an older fella. Yeah. They all called me Baba, Father, like an old man, studying Baba, a woman, old man. So, and I was there 4 years. And I was ordained December 3rd, 1978 at St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church, 695 North Main Street, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
And you were 30?
By Bishop Thomas Dolani, who was our auxiliary. And I was 36.
What was the temperature?
It was, I think, about 73 and maybe 20 Celsius.
Never mind. You were 36.
Yes, sir.
Did you completely close the door on what had been your life, or have you been apparently successful in melding the two?
At that time, I completely devoted my whole life to God, to Catholicism, to my calling. I was up and down the East Coast, mostly on the East Coast. My first assignment was Trenton. And you've heard of the great Ernie Kovacs? He was our parishioner. Ernie Kovacs. Of course, he had been deceased by that time. But I spent a year there. Then I went to our cathedral parish at St. Michael's in Passaic. And then from there, I was sent to my own parish. We get parishes quicker than the Latin Rite because we're smaller in numbers, but larger in geography. So I went to South Hadley, Massachusetts. I spent 2 years there. While I was there was an opening for an Air Force chaplain. I was curious. My bishop had come in. We had the 60th anniversary of the parish. He came in. I asked him, would he allow me to do it? They said, absolutely. So he allowed me to go into the United States Air Force Reserve. I was commissioned a first lieutenant at Westover Air Force Base, did my training down in the South at Montgomery, Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, and came back and did my duty as a reservist. I think, and then from there, the bishop sent me back to Pennsylvania to Beaver Meadows, to Saints Peter and Paul, to assist Father Stephen Luzetsky, who was a wonderful man, filled with life and humor. And I helped. He had a couple of strokes, so I was a good aid to him. And while I was there, I was still pursuing my Air Force chaplaincy in Philadelphia at the 913th Combat Support Squadron on the compound of Willow Grove Naval Air Station. Eventually, I left there and went across the street while still being a priest in a parish to the 111th Tactical Air Support Group, Air National Guard. And from there, I went active duty.
And you were active. When did you come out of the Air Force?
Well, I was, in other words, from 81 to 87, I was reserve. The U.S. Air Force Reserve captain, eventually made captain in Philadelphia at the 913th Combat Support Squadron at Willow Grove, and then went to Air National Guard. And then my mom had passed away, of blessed memory, Margaret, God bless her, in 1987. And my bishop said, look, your mommy just passed away. Bishop Duty said, if you like, you can go active duty. So I then entered active duty as an Air Force chaplain.
As I said, I met you in your surroundings, and that was the broadcast pioneers. I wasn't kidding when I said you were working the room, but that's what you do. That's your personality.
I just love people.
I know you do, yeah.
Like the Hermas Grandest and Carla called me and said, Father, will you do a feed? I said, do you need any groups? Let's get the Elegants, Little Star. Let's get Larry Chance and the Earls. Remember then the Philly boy that went to New York, the Fame. Let's get Tony Orlando. And we're rolling right now. We got about 20 or 30 people.
Really? She
doesn't know. She don't know if she can get the recording studio time.
That's wonderful.
When I was a little boy, my mother told me, excuse me, she showed me a picture. My mom's passed away since 87. She was born 1900. Bless her. I loved her dearly. She was my life, mother and father. She showed me a picture, a little black and white, of me downtown Philadelphia, Market Street, Chester, but pulling on the pant legs of some man, some fella. And she said, Jimmy, when you look, they took a picture of me with an old Brownie camera. She said, when I looked up at the man, I said, I love you. Do you love me? Can you imagine that? I was 5 years old, 6 years old.
Do you know who the man was?
No, none. Of course, the essence is that I just love people.
Yeah.
I love people to a fault.
Yeah.
I think of others. I don't want to boast, but I think of others before I think of me. And even that time, when we were at the last Broadcast Pioneers, there were a bunch of young people. I worked the room to make them feel good and to give them a blessing if they wanted it. If they didn't want it, I still give. No, I'm just kidding. One night I gave a blessing. Are you Catholic? She said, no. I said, you are now.
You gave me a blessing.
That's right. I gave you a Byzantine blessing.
Yeah. But you haven't been able to hold a job.
That's right. This priesthood stuff, the salary stinks. They tell me the rewards later are very good.
You're currently retired. What does that mean?
81 years old. You believe that?
What does that mean? You're retired. You're not assigned to a parish.
Yeah, because you got to remember that I have a disability, military disability. So I tend not to want to be too active. I am active and aggressive.
Yeah.
But many priests, when you get older, many times like to just kind of be alone, as outgoing as I am, and not be in a rectory. I love being in a rectory, and I was in a rectory with Father Ed Connolly at St. Jude of the Apostle for 20-some years when I was the VA chaplain at Lebanon, PA. And I had weekend masses and lived there, and I loved it, but he retired. We both left and went to Girardville. He retired. I said, oh, we'll retire.
You told me you were stationed at St. Clair?
I had the bishop's parish.
Which is a skipping of a rock over to Frackville, where I was born.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was there. I had St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church in St. Clair, PA, and St. Mary's Byzantine Greek Catholic Church in Brockton, a little tiny parish, 2 parishes. My mother was living with me then in the maid's room. It was a beautiful rectory on 131 South Main Street.
Tell me about the Goomba gang.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to, I went to a beautiful thing. By the way, if I can get a plug in, I'm on Saturday mornings on the famed T. Morgan's outside FM.com. 6 a.m. to 8 of it. There's some great disc jockeys. Dick Summer from WBZ.
You're on air now?
I'm on the air every Saturday morning, 6 to 8 a.m. And I'm on air now, of course.
Yeah.
What are you drinking
No.
there, Richard? I'm sorry. That's terrible. It's very below my standards.
So what's the station again? What are the call letters?
OutsideFM.com. It is a streaming radio station. T. Morgan, the famed T. Morgan, that brought classic rock to WMMR-FM back in the days, 60s, 70s. It worked for WIBG. I Believe in God. Did you know that?
No.
I Believe in God. WIBG.
I never knew that.
You get that all here on the Rich and Anthony Show and my guest on the Jim Drucker Show, Father Jim Drucker.
So, I forgot the question.
I did.
See what you do to me? I forgot the question. Well, the clock on the wall says we have to wind.
Are we getting close?
Yeah, we're there.
Oh, wow.
This went much better than I thought it might. Oh, have you covered all your questions?
No, and I wanted to mention also that I have a Byzantine Catholic series that I taped and recorded, wrote, hosted, and produced it for the Scranton Diocese of Scranton. Jim Brennan is communications director. She put all my 9 shows professionally done, and they were aired on KTHV TV in Little Rock when I was the senior Catholic chaplain there. The fellow that owned the commercial station, CBS, was a Catholic fellow. And so you can tune in to the Byzantine series by going simply to YouTube, the Catholic Church Unity Within Diversity. The Catholic Church Unity Within Diversity. Or just putting unity, there's 9 shows, and one of them's on the Maronite Rite.
I got to pull the plug.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
I love you.
It's been a pleasure.
Pray for me. I'll pray for you.
My guest has been Dr. Jim Drucker.
Doctor? I'm a priest.
You're
father.
With a father.
Yeah. I'm a doctor of the soul.
Oh, I'm sorry. Father.
I am so confused. Tune in next
confused.
week. He'll be my guest next week.
Thank you very much for being here. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. Take very good care of yourselves.